Hello again. If you are opening Module 6, you have a unit design template with a big idea or theme and broad objectives for that unit ready to go forward. In Module 6, what we're going to do is then take those broad objectives that we wrote that are on our theme or our big idea, and we're going to design integrated and differentiated both formative and summative assessments that are again measurable outcomes and align, that is, have the same use of the verbs as the objectives, just like we did in our single content area lesson in 621A, but we're going to make it broader, and we're going to address this idea of integrated content. Your tasks for this module are to read, write, and use the resources that I've provided, add the stage 2 part of your understanding by design onto your template, and then submit those assessments by that due date so that we can have a conversation about them. And then when you have gotten to a place where we're both happy with those assessments, we'll move on to stage 3. So let's go ahead and look and see what we have in Module 6. So again, we have the checking for understanding that I hope you will always use. We have some direct instruction. I'm going to talk about right now what that new assessment is going to look like. Here you have some ideas. Many of you are new to teaching and lesson design, so this document right here, 6 Alternative Forms of Student Assessment, is exactly that. It's some ideas about ways to assess students. And I just have this quick note here about equality versus equity, and I want you to think about that. In the first cartoon, we show what's called equality. Each student was given the same size box, and you can see there's still advantages and disadvantages to their position. When we talk about equity, we're talking about giving each kid what they need to succeed. And in this case, we want each child to be able to look over that fence. So some students need different supports than others. So think about that as you're designing your units and your lessons. Okay, so what I have here to show you now is a unit design template that has both stage 1 and stage 2 completed. You'll notice that I have cycles of life for my big idea. I'm going to talk about cycles of life. You can see that I have integrated content areas here: the social studies, science, math, literacy, technology, and art, drama, or music. This lesson is for 4 to 5 days across 2 to 3 weeks, because remember, very often we have a limited amount of time in our classes that are not dedicated to reading and math times that we are asked to set aside. So I'm planning on this unit taking 4 to 5 days. I've started to include my materials just as before, and I said in the red here that I'll probably add more materials as I design my learning opportunities. But thinking ahead, this is what I have in mind that I'm going to need. I've included the grade level on here. This is very important for me to know what kind of pedagogy I should be looking for to help you design your lessons. So make sure you please include that for me. I did not write out the standards here, but my expectation is that you will write out the standards so that I can know exactly what standards you're talking about. So if we look at the objectives for this unit that I designed, I will write and draw a description and explanation. Broad, that could apply to any number of content areas and any number of conditions. I'll prepare and perform a dramatic representation, or will write and sing a song. I will calculate lengths of time. I will explain the importance of a person, place, or event. And I will use visually to design and create an infographic. So these are broad. I can reuse them. They're understandable to kids and families. So let's go ahead and look at stage 2, because that's what we want to talk about this module. When we're doing a unit, and particularly for when you're thinking about your student teaching, you are going to need to pre-assess and post-assess that unit. So very often when you do a pre-assessment, your students will come back and they'll know nothing, and that's okay. But if they know a lot of things that you were planning on already teaching, then you know you can go faster over those parts. So, or change them or modify them as necessary. So it's very important to pre-assess. So my pre-assessment for this unit is I'm just going to ask students to draw and annotate the life cycle of a salmon. My expectation is that I'm going to get a wide range of responses to that. And that gives me a lot of information. I know which students I need to do some interventions with. I know which students I need to maybe provide some other additions to the unit. I have here, I wrote potential in red because my formative assessments are going to change as I go along. Formative assessments are those things you do every day, the walking around the room and looking, the asking kids questions, the making observations, the looking at the daily work. And so those are formative assessments that are also probably going to show up in your stage 3 as learning opportunities as well, because they're both, they're iterative. So these might be revised as I design products and processes as well. As I get down into stage 3, I may see somewhere where I need to add a formative assessment. When you're thinking about formative assessments, you want to think about, what do I need to know that kids know before I can go forward? We can't assume that students know certain things when we're going to a unit. I'm doing a unit here about the life cycle, about life cycles, but I'm specifically going to focus on the life cycle of the salmon more specifically for this group of students. So I need to ask myself some questions. Can students identify and write the word salmon? Many of the students probably will, but I may have some students who need some additional teaching on that. So that's one thing I need to think about. I need to pre-assess or do a formative assessment on. That the student knows what a life cycle is. This may have been work that they did in a previous grade level. The student may have missed it. They may have forgotten it. They may not have been paying attention. So I need to make sure that we can all do this. A lot of this can be accomplished in the first class meeting, the first introduction to the unit, but you want to make sure that you can do this. I'm going to be expecting them to calculate time. So I need to know, can every student who is engaging in this unit make basic addition, subtraction, and multiplication calculations? If they can't, that's something I need to teach. If I don't check these things, I may have students who are not successful in my unit. Can they describe fishing? Do they understand and can they explain how people make money by fishing? What about the word economy? This is a word I'm going to use. This is where I might discover I need to pre-teach my vocabulary, and I probably should pre-teach my vocabulary anyways. So I'm thinking through these things that I need to make sure are there so that I'm scaffolding the learning appropriately, and they become part of my assessment as well. They're also going to be part of my stage 3 learning opportunities, but as I said, they duplicate themselves, these formative assessments and learning opportunities. Can the student find the area we're talking about on a map? Do they know that they live in that area on the map? Can they write a sentence? And then can they log on to and use visually? I'm assuming as I'm writing this lesson that I've taught some of these things. It looks obvious in this lesson, and I will probably ask you this question if you turned in a unit like this. Have you used visually before with your students? So you probably want to do a refresher on how to log on and use visually. Now my summative assessment and my post-assessment aren't necessarily the same thing, as you'll see. My summative assessment is that the student will produce an infographic using visually that describes and explains the life cycle of the salmon and its importance to the economy of Southeast Alaska. You don't need to include rubrics for 621B, but you will for 621C. The student will work in a group to design and perform a dramatic representation, or will write or sing a song about the life cycle of the salmon. This is where I'm offering choice, part of that differentiation we're going to talk about next week. I'm offering students choice about how they want to represent their work. The student can accurately calculate the approximate time that will pass for the completion of their life cycle. It's really important when you write assessments that you're specific. Do you need them to have 100%? Do you need them to be accurate? Do you want them to have 100%? Do you want them to have within 90%? And that's where you would signify that in a rubric. Then I have my post-assessment. Remember my pre-assessment was up here. I just had them draw and annotate the life cycle of a salmon. When I get to my post-assessment, I'm going to have them do the infographic that explains the life cycle of a salmon. So I'm assessing the same skills and knowledge. I'm doing it in different ways, but what I'm assessing is exactly the same. The how of the assessment can change. The what of the assessment needs to stay the same as far as your pre and post assessment. So that is what you need to do for this module, basically the top half of your unit design, and start to think about stage 3. As I said, some of these formative assessments are going to show up again in your stage 3 as learning opportunities and activities. And that's okay. So what you need to do for this week is look at this sample and then start thinking about how your unit is going to line up as far as that. Remember, we're looking for those broad, reusable objectives, measurable assessments that are more specific. And then think about equity and equality as far as your assessments, providing choice, and when you're starting to think forward to your learning opportunities. We're going to talk a lot more about differentiation in the next module. Do the checking for understanding, please, to check your own thinking, and then make sure you have everything turned in on time for the first first go at it by the due date, and then your instructor and yourself will have a conversation about what you need to do to improve and what you did really great. And if you have any questions, send your instructor an email or a Twitter.